Today, we're diving into the story of an empire so incredibly powerful, it's often called the world's first true superpower. But here's the crazy part. When it fell so hard and so completely that just a couple hundred years later, people didn't even remember its name. This is the wild story of the Assyrian Empire. And our story doesn't actually start with the empire's rise, but with its mysterious ghost, seen through the eyes of a lost Greek army centuries after it had all turned to dust. So, picture this. It's 401 BC. A Greek writer and soldier named Xenophon is leading 10,000 mercenaries on a desperate march through modern-day Iraq. And out of nowhere, they stumble upon these colossal, totally deserted ruins. The walls, as he wrote here, were just immense, bigger and grander than anything they've ever seen back in Greece. Xenophon was just baffled by what he saw. He started asking every local person he could find, hey, who built these incredible cities? Turns out he was looking at the ruins of Nimrud and Nineveh, but nobody knew. They told him these wild stories about gods who destroyed the cities with fire from the sky. The actual memory of the people who built them was just gone. This timeline really puts it all into perspective. I mean, when Xenophon saw these ruins, the famous Parthenon back in Athens was barely 50 years old, but the city of Nineveh had already been a pile of rubble for over 200 years. So to the people we consider ancient, the Greeks and the Romans, the Assyrians were their impossibly ancient past. So who were these people? How did they build something so mighty it could just be completely forgotten? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to a time of total, world-shattering collapse. The Assyrians started out in a pretty humble trading city called Ashur. Now, around 1200 BC, the ancient world was absolutely rocked by what we call the Bronze Age collapse. Major empires, like the Hittites, were just wiped off the map. But two civilizations managed to cling on for dear life: Egypt and Assyria. They survived by pulling back, hunkering down, and just weathering the storm. But just because they survived didn't mean they were safe. Assyria was now this tiny little strip of land, completely surrounded by enemies and with no mountains or seas to protect them. Their whole existence boiled down to being tougher, smarter, and more innovative than everybody else. It was a pretty simple choice, really: adapt or die. And this is where they got their big break. As the Bronze Age was collapsing, a new era was beginning: the Iron Age. See, bronze needs both copper and tin had to travel on these long, fragile trade routes. But iron? Iron was everywhere. It's 10 times more common. The Assyrians jumped on this new tech, and it let them mass-produce stronger weapons and tools on a scale nobody had ever seen before. Okay, so let's see how they took that access to iron, combined it with a ruthless new military philosophy, and created maybe the most terrifying army the world had ever seen up to that point. You know, before the 8th century BC, the Assyrian army was like pretty much everyone else's. It was made up of farmers. They'd fight in the spring and summer, but had to be home for the fall harvest. So if a city wanted to rebel, they could just lock their gates and wait it out. But then, a king named Tiglath-Pileser III came along and changed everything. He created the world's first professional, year-round standing army. And these were the keys to his new military machine. It started with that professional corps. Then, you back them up with basically expendable infantry conscripted from the lands you conquered. You add a dedicated corps of engineers who could build siege ramps, bridges, whatever you needed. And finally, you give everyone mass-produced iron weapons. This new army was so good, it once laid siege to a city for 3 straight years. That was just unimaginable back then. But their greatest weapon? It wasn't iron. It was pure terror. Assyrian kings weren't just cruel. They were masters of propaganda. They meticulously carved records of their atrocities onto public monuments for everyone to see. The message couldn't be clearer: resist us, and this is exactly what will happen to you. So yeah, it's really easy to just see the Assyrians as these one-dimensional killing machines. But if we shift our focus from the battlefield to their incredible cities, a much more complicated and honestly, surprisingly relatable picture starts to form. I mean, check this out. Archaeologists found this complaint written on a clay tablet. It's from a boy at boarding school writing to his mom. He's upset because his friend, whose dad is just an assistant to his dad, has 2 new outfits, while he only has 1. It's this amazing reminder that beneath all the armor and the empire building, these were just people. with really familiar problems. And life in a city like Nineveh was a total sensory overload. People used these cool little cylinder seals like a personal signature to sign contracts. Beer was a staple of their diet. They blamed demons for basically everything, from getting sick to a bad smell in the house. Their policy of mass deportations, while brutal, actually created some of the world's first truly multicultural cosmopolitan cities, all linked up by this fantastic highway system. Now, the empire's last great king, a guy named Ashurbanipal, was a ruthless warrior for sure, but he was also a scholar who was obsessed with one massive project, collecting all the knowledge of the world. He created what was basically the first universal library in Nineveh, gathering over 30,000 clay tablets. And this library is one of Assyria's most important legacies to us today. Ashurbanipal sent his scribes all over the empire with one command: copy every text you can find. It's because of his obsession that foundational works of human literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, were actually saved instead of being lost forever. It's just a stunning paradox, isn't it? An empire built on destruction was also devoted to preservation. And yet, at the absolute height of its power, the entire Assyrian Empire came crashing down. So how on earth could the world's greatest superpower collapse so fast and so completely? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of fatal weaknesses. As you can see here, centuries of non-stop war had drained their resources. Their tactics of terror meant they were surrounded by people who absolutely despised them, which led to endless rebellions. And right when they were stretched to the breaking point, nature dealt them one final, devastating blow. And this part is really fascinating. New climate science, from analyzing mineral deposits in caves in Iraq, has revealed that a severe, decades-long mega drought hit the Assyrian heartland. This absolutely crippled their farms and their food supply, right when they needed it most to fuel that massive war machine. So that leads us to the final mistake, the one that sealed their fate. In a fit of rage, Ashurbanipal completely wiped his old rival, the Kingdom of Elam, off the map. He probably thought he was solving a problem for good, but what he actually did was create a massive power vacuum. A new group, the Medes, rose up in Elam's place, united all of Assyria's other enemies, and led a coalition that burnt Nineveh to the ground in 612 BC. The Assyrians built an empire of honor and terror that must have seemed invincible. They created a military that was centuries ahead of its time, and a library that saved humanity's oldest stories. And yet, their legacy was one of such profound hatred that their conquerors didn't just destroy their cities, they worked to erase their very memory from the world. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it that truly makes an empire's legacy last?